Right. So, hello everyone once again. It's Karol Jarkowski from Kentico Software, and we are here with another partners webinar. And this month, the topic is running websites in the enterprise. Well, the topic is building highly scalable websites, but for some reason I opened the wrong presentation. I'm sorry about that. Give me a second. And as I said in the invitation, this is the presentation that I've got at Kentico Connection in Denver this year, and as I feel it might be very useful to spread it over the wide audience, I would like to do that as a partners webinar as well. So let's be honest. I believe that we all read some book or watched some kind of presentation related to development of highly efficient and scalable websites at some point, didn't we? So, I mean, I have read tens of articles and several books on this topic, and everything I read has had in common was it was mostly about the SQL performance tuning, code optimization techniques, data manipulation strategies, and all those things that they basically keep talking about over and over again. And I mean, of course, those are important things, and including me, myself, and my colleagues, we also talk about them. But I was feeling that I have already read enough about those things, and I was trying to find some other information, something that I wasn't aware about yet. So what I would like to therefore do today is focus on slightly different topics when it comes to the website performance, and rather talk about things rather than talking about the things we have already read or heard about. Let's focus on something that I find much more interesting, and in lots of cases even more important than the other concerns you may have around your website's performance. Based on the research I've been doing for some time now, I really believe that today's hardware and technology. With today's hardware and technology, the real bottleneck of most of the websites when it comes to the performance and scalability is not so much the server-side code, but rather maintaining of inefficient communication between web server and client, meaning client browser. And that's why in this webinar I'd like to focus on best practices and recommendations that will help you achieve mostly faster page load, will help you take off big chunk of load from your website to give it more room for breathing, and ultimately present you with some of the features of Kentico 6.0 that should be of great help in order to achieve those improvements. As usual, if you've got any trouble hearing me, or if you got any trouble seeing my screen, please let me know through the chat window. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. There will be time at the end of the webinar for answering your questions, whatever they may be. So let's take a look. Let's start with the presentation. So let's start with some very basic on how the communication between the client browser and web server over TCP actually looks like. I know that that's probably something that you all are aware of, or most of you are, but I want to go through this exchange scheme anyway, to explain what key tasks you need to address in order to optimize the data transfer between the client and server, and thus deliver more user-friendly websites. And it will also ensure that we are all on the same page concerning this low-level stuff around which I'm going to build this presentation. So what you can see over here is are basically two timelines, one for the client, one for the server, and we start with the client. So imagine user open the browser, types in URL address, and hits enter. So what's happening? Based on the URL, that the browser gets an IP address from the DNS server and enters so-called handshake phase by sending out TCP sync package, which is sent to the server and received by the server. Server accepts connection and confirms retrieval of sync package, sending acknowledge package back to the client. So at this time, server is ready to handle client requests, and after the server responds with this acknowledge packet, connection is considered opened. Keep in mind that the establishing new connection is rather time-consuming process. So therefore, what we're going to focus on, or what we should be focusing on, is to reusing already open connection as much as possible instead of opening a new one with every request. So the server sends the acknowledge package back to the client, and client will compose the HTTP request. HTTP get packet, which contains the HTTP request header with URL, cookies, and other details, and send it to the web server. Web server again receive the package, acknowledge the retrieval, sending out the acknowledge package, and start generating response. As you can see, that little empty space on the server's timeline identifies the time when the connection is idle while waiting for the response to be generated. That time is spent on the server side retrieving the data, by retrieving the data from the database, processing the data, and generating the response like the HTML source. So once the response is ready, server creates response package containing the HTTP response header and first few bytes of actual HTML source. So it's not the whole response, the HTML whole response at once, but only a few bytes, and how many bytes are included within that first response packet depends on what is the allowed TCP packet size per response. So this response is sent to the client. The client acknowledge the successful retrieval of that initial package, sending out acknowledge packet. Again, the connection is delay during that time, and as long as typically the response, the HTML response will be bigger than maximum allowed size for HTTP response per request, there will be several response and acknowledge packet exchange between the web server and client before the whole response is sent to the client. So that's a simplified timeline of the HTTP over TCP packet exchange. As you can see, there is quite much going on before, after, and during the data transfer. And now when we are all aware of what's going on in the background, let's identify parts of the exchange process that we can ultimately improve and thus gain more performance, especially concerning the page load time, which is like primary focus of the first part of this webinar. So first of all, obviously, we want to try to eliminate connection idle time as much as possible. So, as I mentioned, the connection becomes idle between the time the server receives the HTTP request and the time initial HTTP response is sent to the client. We can effectively minimize the idle time and related page load time by using multiple simultaneous connections. Concerning the initial response time, it's the first, before the first HTTP response packet is created. It's obvious that the idle time also depends on how fast the server-side code can generate the response itself. So still, eventually, the data access, data processing, and data binding phases or time has also impact on the overall idle time. So that's why I want to talk about the things like parallelism with HTTP, ordering resources in the final HTML, network optimization, and script handling, as this ultimately defines how fast page loads, or at least how fast it appears to the visitor, which is sometimes even more important. And in addition to these protocol or technology related improvements, I'm going to show you some great new features of Kentico 6.0, as I mentioned, that should make retrieval processing and rendering faster than with previous versions. So that would be the first goal we will try to address. And the second thing is we should try to get rid of unnecessary GET requests completely. So instead of, or in addition to shrinking the time that it takes to get the response from the server, we should try to completely avoid GET requests whenever it doesn't make sense or whenever it's not really necessary. So the second part of the webinar is related to the best practices on how to eliminate as many unnecessary HTTP requests as possible, mostly using the caching capabilities available in Kentico 6.0. And at that point, I would like to talk especially about enhanced client cache and output cache features. So let's start with the first goal, that's eliminating connection idle time. So first of all, as I said, we want to keep connection busy. What does it mean? Is that connection by nature, okay, here we go. So the code or the response retrieved from the server is processed sequentially. That's something that you are probably aware of. So as you've seen, the response is not retrieved all at once. It's received in the chunks or the multiple packets, and so browsers parse the code that is retrieved on the fly, and any external resource, and by external resource I mean it might be the JavaScript, external JavaScript that you refer somewhere in the header or in the HTML code. It might be any picture you refer. It might be any media object that you refer. Whatever is referred through the URL as an external resource is identified on the fly as the code is processed, and as soon as such resource is found in the HTML source, browser tries to fire a new request to download such resource. So to put it in a practical example, what you can see over here, that would be the timeline of retrieval of simple page from the earlier stage till the complete response is retrieved. What you can see over here are several stages that the response processing goes through, and at the very first stage, in the light blue, you can see the time that is spent by resolving the URL to IP address using the DNS server. So that's this part. Once we have the IP address, a new connection is opened. That's this yellow bar. After the connection is opened, the HTTP request packet is sent to the server, and the first response, so containing the HTTP response header and those first few bytes of HTML source, actual HTML source, is retrieved by browser, and then the rest, the light green bar, identifies the time that is necessary to retrieve the rest of the response. In this example, we are talking about a page that has some image, external resource unidentified, in the middle of the text. So as you can see, as the rest of the response was retrieved, somewhere in the middle of that response, the image was identified, and that's why a new connection was opened in parallel with the rest of the data being retrieved, or the rest of the response being retrieved. And once the connection was open, the rest of the binary data for the image were retrieved. The important note here is that the usually browser supports up to 2 parallel connection to the same domain. So in this case, it looks like the image and the page itself were stored under the same domain, so www.something.com, let's say, and that's why you can see that the browser was able to open another second parallel connection to retrieve the image. The first thing that I wanna make you realize is that if I move that image, the reference of that image, from the middle of the page of the text at the beginning, you can see that obviously the download of that image, or the request for the image, is fired much sooner. So instead of in the middle of the response retrieval process, it's fired, let's say, much closer to the beginning, and therefore you can see that the whole image, the download of the whole image, ends much sooner. So the first advice is include one or more object references at the top of the HTML. So you can see, notice the end of the image downloading as it moves with the position of the image in the HTML source. So that's the first thing I want to make sure you are aware of. The second thing is it's related to the fact that whatever you specify in the head element of your page, so within the header, is downloaded before anything referred in the body is downloaded. So nothing else basically happens until all the resources referred through the header are downloaded. So imagine that you've got a really huge JavaScript referred in the header. So user will come to your website, to your page, and they will see nothing but blank page for, I don't know, 1, maybe 2 seconds if you are downloading from third-party external repository which is not reliable in maintaining the stable response time, you may end up with two seconds delay. And for me as a visitor, it wouldn't feel very nice about the website. So the tip here is move resources from head to the body of your HTML whenever you can, because as you already know, with the whatever is referred in a body is actually part of that HTML resource, and it's parsed sequentially, so at least something will appear for the user at the page before the rest of the page is downloaded. Another thing that is somehow related to this is that even the order of the resources has influence on how fast your page loads. What will be the overall feeling of how fast your website looks like. And that's because, as we already seen, the resources are downloaded in the order they are defined in the HTML, because the fact that the response is processed sequentially. And so if you have any big files like big images or big scripts at the beginning of the code before the text portion of your website or some smaller design elements, the site may look, the page load may look slow. So what you can do is you can use a technique that is called late loading. That's technique that is using JavaScript and CSS, and it's used to achieve out-of-order objects loading. And as you can see, what you can do is, if you know that you need to have like a huge banner at the top of your website, what you can do is you can include the image tag at the bottom of your at the top of your website. You set the width and height. That's the important part, because if you don't specify the width and height for the image element, either through the image tag attributes or through the CSS class, the browser, you will see the relayout of the page as the content is loaded. So you may see text jumping around the page until all the images are loaded, and that's because you haven't specified those width and height. If you specify the width and height, the browser knows that it has to reserve the space on the page and will render the rest of the content around that space reserved. And then if you have that image tag on your page, then at the end of the HTML source, you can set the source for that element to some specific image, and at that point the browser will start downloading that image and will eventually render it in the code. So that's called late loading. There is similar technique that can be used for early loading, and the early loading may be useful if you wanna pre-cache basically the image before it's really required. And it's basically the same thing. You've got the image in the HTML code, image tag in the HTML code, again with the width and height, and the script this time creates dynamically the new image object and set its source before the browser gets to the processing the image tag itself. So now we want to try, or we want to know more about how to enable that simultaneous download in browsers. So as I already mentioned, there are the browsers today support, or most of the browser today supports up to 2 simultaneous connections per domain. It's important to remember it's per domain, it's not per IP. So, because as you will see, we can use this fact later to even more streamline the retrieval of the sources from the external repositories. So, let's take a look on the example. And this would be the simple page that has basically no content, like no text content, but it's all that's contained within the body tag would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images, as you can see. So again, some time is spent on resolving, and all those images are retrieved from the same domain, so www.something.com, let's say. So as you can see, the some time is spent for resolving the URL to IP, then the connection is open to something.com domain, the page HTML source is retrieved, and images are being processed. So there is first image, so the browser is using the existing connection that is open, that was used to retrieve the first initial response packet, and is using this connection to retrieve the first image. At the same time, it can open another connection, because there are 2 connections allowed per the same domain, so another something.com connection is opened, and the image is retrieved. The third image is not being retrieved until one of those 2 connections becomes idle or finish downloading of the previous resource. So when the first image is downloaded, the third image is downloaded using the existing connection. The same thing happens with the fourth image, so it's waiting for the second to finish, and then the last image is being downloaded as soon as the third image is finished. So you can see, as there are only 2 connections allowed at the same time to same domain, that's how the images would be downloaded. So you would end up, the overall time of overall page load would take like so long. What we can do is we can refer the images to the different domains, even though those domains would point at the end to the same IP address, as long as the images would be referred to 2 different domains. It would help us to start downloading all images at the same time, as you can see. So what you can see over here is there are 3 domains basically. The page itself sits on d1, the domain.com, and the first image sits at the same domain, so d1 the domain.com. And then we have 2 images from d2 domain.com and 2 images from d3 domain.com. And as you can see, as soon as the first initial packet is retrieved, and by processing the response, the images are external resources are identified, and the browser finds out that there are 3 different domains used, it will open basically 4 new connections at the same time, start downloading all 5 images at the same time. And as you can see, the difference between the total page load time is significant. So by using the different domains for those external resources, you allow downloading multiple objects from the same domain, and that way you shorten the total page load time. Again, keep in mind that you can point both domains to the same IP address, or in other words, to the same website in Kentico CMS, you can achieve that very easily, specifying another domain aliases for your website. You can either even use or even create a separate website in the Kentico instance and store and use it just for storage, like a storage for your files, in case it makes sense in scenarios when you have like multiple websites that are using the same images or same design assets or same media files, and you can point all those websites to the same shared repository. And by using the same domains on multiple websites, if the client tends to navigate between the websites from the same client browser, you will save a lot of processing time and a lot of page load time when you follow this this setup. So this is definitely very simple change, and still very powerful. So that would be about the images. Now the other area of concern when it comes to the page load and what you can do on the client side to optimize the page load time is how you will order and include and order your script files in the page. The one important thing about the fact about script files and how they are how script files are downloaded and processed is that with the script files, it's not like with the images where you can have parallel images downloaded at the same time. Whenever the browser starts downloading the script files, everything else, like the rendering is stopped, no other objects are retrieved in the parallel with the script files. So that's why it's important where you place your script files and how it will influence the feeling and user experience with the page. So let's take, for example, this case when we would have some two JavaScript files included on the at the beginning of the page, and then we would have several images, like 4 images referred later in the text, and those images are in the groups of 2 referred from through the different domains. So we are basically following the best practice with the images, and we have 2 additional JavaScript files before those images. So what's going to happen again? DNS resolve time, connection open, initial packet retrieve, and now we identify the first JavaScript file. What you can see is nothing else is happening at the same time. Everything is waiting for the first script to be downloaded. Then the second script is identified, so a new connection is open and the script is downloaded, and after that time the images are downloaded all at once. By reordering the script files and the images, we are able to significantly improve the page load time. If you notice the overall time it takes to for page to load, it's optimized dramatically. So what we've done is we have put the script files at the end. We move it from the beginning of the HTML source to the end. So the first of all images are loaded, all images are being loaded at the same time, and as long as images supports parallel resource downloading, even the first JavaScript, it's the download of first JavaScript starts along with the images. Of course, then the second JavaScript is not being downloaded until the first one is finished, but it still gives us significant improvement when it comes to the page load time. So the advice, place script at the end of your HTML. If you need the script earlier in the source, try to place at least 1 or more resources before the JavaScript based on how soon you need to work with the script. So this would conclude the first part of the webinar, and now we will move forward to the second part. And let's take a look on the client cache. The client cache in Kentico CMS 5.x, so 5.5 or 5.5 R2, was still powerful, but it's obviously got its weak places. Several of them were that first of all, to enable it, you had to make a change in the web config file, and it caused the application to restart. The other thing that I found quite limiting was that it always added the master validate cache control header into the response. So even though the client cache was enabled, it was always doing at least the validation requests back to the server, from the client to the server, to ask whether whatever the browser has in the cache is up to date or whether it should reload, which is in some scenarios desired, but in some cases it's not necessary at all. So we'd always perform the validation check, and cache minutes, there was no way how to specify the cache minutes for full client cache separately from the standard cache settings. So what improvements were made in 6.0? First of all, the client cache is fully managed through the site manager and settings section, and you've got full control over the cache minutes, which are specified directly for the full client cache, and you also have a control about whether the validation check needs to be performed, so whether the master validate cache control header should be added to the response or not. The nice thing about the client cache in Kentico 6.0 is that with introducing a new get resource a web service that is used to link CSS files, JavaScript files, and other resources on the Kentico website, we are able to add the client cache control headers into the response for all of those files. With 6.0, there is always e-tag, last modified, and expires cache control header added to the response time. So the client browser got all the information that is required in order to even come up or count some heuristic expiration time based on the last modified or e-tag information that is provided in the response header. So the client cache should be much more efficient in 6.0 than 5.x. And I will certainly prepare some blog post or some other webinar that will focus in more detail on client cache in Kentico 6.0. At this point, just be aware of these improvements, and you may want to play around with it yourself to see what is the impact. Another tip would be that don't forget we have implemented the compression and minification capabilities for resources like CSS or JavaScript, and we have dynamic compression, gzip compression available for the HTML response. So you may want to use those to save some additional bytes. The nice thing, and something that I like the most about new output cache, is new storage for the output cache. So far, the output cache with previous versions, the output cache always stored its content in the memory. Downside of the memory in-memory storage is that whenever there is a crash on your website, whenever there are issues causing the restart of the website, you basically lost all your information that was cached in the memory. Imagine situation with the enterprise website, heavy visited website during the peak load time, when there is like literally thousands of users on the websites at the same time, and something goes wrong, the application needs to be restarted, the pool needs to be restarted, you lost your output cache, and that first few minutes until all the content is loaded in the memory again might be really pain for you and for the visitors as well. So with Kentico 6.0 there is a new storage for the output cache. It's located within the file system. You are able to control the number of minutes that the content should be cached in the file system separately, which is another great great thing about this new storage, and it provides the persistent storage for the output cache. So even if the application restart occurs, if system finds out that there isn't content in memory, it will try to retrieve it from the file system. So you are basically getting rid of that issue related to first content load after the application restart that you had to face with the in-memory output cache storage. Another thing, and that's another something that we introduced because you asked for it, is cache substitution. It's simple. It's like any other macro expression, so it has its own format. You are using tilde and curly brackets, and then the key, the macro key, that can be whatever you want. The thing is that you need to implement the logic that will provide the result or the substitution for this macro in the output cache. And as you probably know, the output cache stores the complete HTML. So with any other macros that you use other than substitution macro, the content is evaluated, and after that it's stored within the output cache. With the case with the cache substitution macro is that the macro is not resolved before it's stored in the output cache. It's resolved between after it's retrieved from the cache and before it's sent to the client. So it allows you to dynamically evaluate the part of the page. So in case that you have a page with the current username somewhere at the right top, you don't need to give up on output cache just because that single little part needs to be dynamic, or you don't need to bother with setting up partial caching for all the web parts on the template, but that's current user web part. Instead, you can use the macro key and resolve it in your custom code for the current user, and you can still enable full page cache for the page, and it will work. Do things right at first place. What I wanted to say, or what I wanted to emphasize, is something that I repeated already several times, and that's that very most important rule of all we have when it comes to the performance, and especially when it comes to the maintenance and scalability of the website in the future, when the site has potential to grow in size. And that rule says that basically there should be no more than 1,000 child nodes per single parent node in the content tree. And in order to ensure that, you can come up with some rule that will specify how or where any new document created will be placed within the structure based on whatever information is available for that document. So to give you an example, I have worked with a customer that has more than a million documents in the content tree, or I guess at this point it might be 1.5 million already, and this is number that we haven't, honestly, we haven't really performed any extended tests for. We had to come up with some solid rule that will really ensure that only up to 1,000 child nodes will be available per parent, and that's why we've been using information on. So I'm talking about the press releases, and every press release we've got some ID, and that ID consists of several groups of digits, each group representing different information. So there were first 3 digits identifying the client's country of origin. Then there was another 3 digits that specify the state within that country. Then another few digits that identify the customer itself, and then digits that represented the date or something. So using that information, we have created the structure that ensures that there will, at no point in the future there will be more than 1,000 child nodes per parent, or at least we have eliminated a huge part of the chance that such situation could occur. So that's the categorized content rule. Then another thing that I find that customers usually forgets about is the power of wildcards and custom tables comparing to storing everything in the content tree. If you don't need to maintain the data hierarchy, if you don't need to use the versioning, or if you don't need to be able to restrict the access to the document on document level, please consider wildcards and custom tables. With the wildcards, you can have single page in the content tree that will contain the wildcards in the URL, and the wildcard will be then used to identify the specific document, specific content that should be rendered on that single page. So let's say news IDs, and there will be a repeater which will reflect the wildcard value in its where condition and display the data of that specific news. So instead of having 100,000 documents, you may in the content tree, you may have single document in the content tree, and 100 news details in the custom table, and save much of processing time. Use cache item name. That's something that I noticed recently. If you are using, if you open the configuration for most of the web parts, data web parts, you can see there is a section that allows you to specify cache item name. Of course, you don't need to specify that cache item name. The system will use some default cache item name, but if you explicitly specify the cache item name, what you can do is use the same cache item name for multiple web parts, and as long as those multiple web parts works with the same set of data, they will be able to reuse the data that are already cached, that were cached, retrieved and cached by one of those web parts. So instead of retrieving the same data with multiple web parts over and over again, you can reuse the cache data. And it also, of course, applied to the web parts that are placed on different page templates, used on different pages. So I'm not talking just about the web parts that are physically present on the same template. And the last thing is that whenever you need to use the custom URL, use document URL path instead of document aliases. For a simple reason, there are certain steps, certain queries at the end, at the very bottom level, that are executed in order to retrieve the information on the page that is requested. So first, the alias path is used to find the page that is requested. If there is no alias path that would match the URL, then the document URL path is searched for match. If the document URL path information in the database matches what is requested in the URL, that's the second query that got executed, and the information on the page is passed to the system, to the upper layers, and the result is rendered. If you use document aliases, there will need to be an additional query executed, so the page details will be retrieved as third query is executed. So now I'm really talking about saving the queries, and that's bottom line is that that's what you need to do when you want to optimize the performance of your website. You want to eliminate all the unnecessary queries, and you want to eliminate the data transfer in general. So using document URL path instead of alias will ensure that. And the last thing, at least I believe it's last thing, yeah, almost last thing. The last thing I want to mention quickly before we get to your questions is the universal viewer. If you haven't heard about the universal viewer, or if you haven't played with universal viewer at 6.0 yet, please do so, because the universal viewer is great help. It saves a lot of queries and a lot of processing time, especially in certain scenarios. So if you imagine the scenario where we have the offices documents in the content tree, and under offices documents there are several particular documents that stands for particular office within the country or whatever. So basically you have parent-child structure that you want to display, that you want to persist and display on the page. You would need to use with 5.x version or previous versions, you would need to use the nested repeaters. So what nested repeaters would do is there will be parent repeater and some nested repeater, and the parent repeater will display would be responsible for rendering those parents, so office countries, let's say. So it will execute the one query to get those office countries data, and then for every office country the nested repeater would execute another query to get the child offices for a specific country. So if you would have like 1,000 or let's say 10 offices in 10 countries, and under each country you would have 5 or 10 offices, you can imagine how many queries needs to be executed and how much data would be executed. And the worst part is that it all would happen like in separate requests. So instead of requesting all the data at once, it would be requested separately. And that's exactly what Universal Viewer tries to eliminate. So Universal Viewer basically executes only single query per document type to get all child documents, no matter how many parent items are being displayed. And as maybe you have noticed that I said here that it executes single query per document type, and that part, the per document type, is important because with so far with previous versions there was just limited way how you could use single repeater to display content of multiple document types. With the new Universal Viewer, it's something that is natively supported, and it works just great. And the best part is that you can define different transformation to be used for the document type, certain document type, on different levels, the content hierarchy. So if there are offices right under the main parent node, and some offices at third level under the parent node. You can specify different transformations for those two locations. That's just summary of what I already talked about. Let's move forward because we are kind of short on the time. The other thing that I would like to drive your attention to is schedule tasks. Right now in 6.0 there is more than 20 out-of-box schedule tasks. Most of them set to execute in intervals between 1 minute and 1 week. The fact is that all those tasks and the especially execution interval was specified by us at our best assumption. However, it's obvious it can't be best fit for all the projects. So first thing you want to do is review the execution intervals of those scheduled tasks and ask yourself whether there is real need to have that scheduled task enabled at all, and if it has any added value for you, what should be the best execution interval. With Kentico 6.0, we are introducing the external services, Kentico external services, which allows you to execute the scheduled task in context of separate thread. So you can execute those scheduled tasks independently on the website itself. So that has two advantages. The first one is that you're not the scheduled tasks are not consuming website resources, and the second thing is that as long as they are run outside the website, if there is something wrong with the website, those scheduled tasks will continue to run and will still perform or serve its purpose. So extend the execution interval according to your needs, or disable certain scheduled tasks completely. Make sure that you install and enable external services, and set the scheduled task to use those external services by default. And basically the only criteria or decision point whether the task can be run outside the website or not is whether the code of the task works with any context information at all. So, like, what is the current website where the task is executed, or what is the current usage of memory, or something like that. But otherwise, in most, I would say 90% of cases, the task can be executed outside the website application pool, and so you can help website that way. And the last thing what I want to emphasize is be aware of the website's stability and the performance, and for that purpose we are introducing the health monitoring, which is part of the Kentico CMS 6.0 and can be set up and plugged to the any health monitoring application, like for example the Windows health monitoring feature, which your administrators can use to keep an eye on what is the usage of the memory, how this website is doing in terms of errors, how much of CPU resources are used, and other stuff. Of course, your primary goal when it comes to the health of your website should be to eliminate as many exceptions as possible. Just to give you an example why it's really important, even if there are some silly little exceptions. I work with a customer that got a huge problem with the performance, like database resources, database server resources were consumed at 99% basically, and it was all caused by the fact that there was little error on the page. Some resources were referenced through the wrong URL. So every request to that resource cost 404 error returned. The 404 errors are logged in the Kentico event log. So with every user opening the page, firing that request for that resource, and eventually causing that 404 error, a new record was inserted into the event log. So during the peak load time, as this customer was a huge traffic website, huge client, there were like thousands of those new records placed in the Kentico event log every minute, and as there is an maximum length of the event log setting, as soon as the total number of records in the event log exceed that maximum number, besides the inserting new records in the event log, system had to handle the deleting old records. So bottom line, as soon as we eliminated that exception that was originally considered very unimportant to the customer, we have got from 99% to something like 40% in terms of usage of the SQL Server CPU. So it's a huge performance. Use built-in debugging tools. There is, so far, if you wanted to enable the built-in debugging tools like SQL Query Debug, Cache Debug, View State Debug, and several others debugging tools, you had to do that in the web config, through the web config file, which again, because the application restart with 6.0, it's all managed through the site manager and settings. The important information I would like to, what I would like you keep in mind is that even though the information on that for the debugging tools is not stored in the database, it's still stored in the memory. So if nothing else, it at least consumes the memory assigned to the website. So on the live side, you should really enable debugging tools only in case of emergency, and the debugging tool should be primarily used for optimizing the website performance. The health monitoring feature, as I said, great help. It's in the developer's guide. There is a whole section devoted to how to set it up and how to work with the health monitoring. So I would recommend you to take a look on that at your earliest convenience. And the last thing I wanna mention before we get to your questions is there is a great book out there. It's called ultrafast.asp.net, Building Ultrafast and Ultra-Scalable Websites. It was written by Rick Kisig, and this great professional worked on a project that really required 100% efficiency and using resources in the right way. And he worked with the organization like NASA or NASA. So you can expect really great information in that book, mostly on the low-level stuff, something that goes beyond what similar publications or similar blog post sessions cover. So I definitely recommend you to take a look on this website if you are concerned about the performance and developing ultrafast.net websites. Okay, so that's all. I'm sorry for extending the time or exceeding the time reserved for this webinar. Before we get offline, let's spend some time answering your questions. So if you have any questions at all, please type it in the question box, and I will try to answer those. On Kentico website. So the first question is if we can find this presentation document anywhere on Kentico website. Sure. The recording of this webinar will be available for you in the partner portal, on the partner portal. After some time, it will also, or basically in a week or so, it will also appear on devnet.kentico.com, and the presentation will be part of the page where you can watch this webinar. So definitely you will have access to that presentation. There is also, sure, you're welcome. There is also a question saying from Drew, saying compression can be enabled at the IIS server, yet you can also compress within Site Manager via allow resource compression. Does checking this box enable compression in IIS configuration, or are you managing it elsewhere? No, what you get, yeah, that's true what you're saying. What we are doing is we have our own, using our own library that is based on gzip compression, and we are compressing the stream, the response stream, on Kentico level, not on the IIS level. So I don't believe it has anything in common with the IIS configuration. So those two things are independent. Does that answer your question? Or do you wanna get some specific information on that resource compression? Okay. Any other questions? Let's wait till another 3 minutes, basically, to see if you can think of anything you would like to know. Well, the question is, should we do both IIS and Kentico compression? As long as we are talking about the same gzip compression, I believe that it's not necessary. Look, it's basically the same as with the caching, the client caching. You can enable the client cache on the IIS level as well, or at least you can specify what cache control headers should be added in the response, in the server response. You can do that on IIS level, or you can use it programmatically in the code. We are doing that programmatically in the code, so you don't need to set it up, or basically you don't want to set it up on the IIS level. So I believe the same would apply to this compression. I personally would enable it on Kentico level, or then only on the IIS level. So I would pick one or another, not both at the same time. So you may want to do some kind of testing for yourself to see which compression works better, because there might be difference in the in the library or the version of gzip or whatever is the dynamic compression used by IIS comparing to what we are using in Kentico. So there might be some difference in how much you are able to save. So I would probably try both one at a time and see which one is better for me and go from there. All right. So what do you recommend to use? Okay, what tools do you recommend to use for measuring performance? It depends what you consider to be for measuring performance. If I can tell you what I typically do when I do the solution review for the customer, and when I have to deal with the customers that has issues, performance issues. So first thing I do is I try to find out where the performance issue lies. So it can be either what we talk about today. So the page loads really slow, but the server generates the response fast enough, and then I'm using plugins for the browser. So I'm using the iSlow, for example, the Yahoo performance debug tool, which give you general recommendations what you should change on the website. I'm using the Firebug to see if there might be any errors, exceptions related to the script resources, to see if that might be the cause of the issue. I'm using the built-in browser debug tools to see how the different browsers process the response. What are the times that are necessary to process the total response? Because sometimes there is some little thing that might cause the difference between huge difference between loading in different browsers. Also, I use the Fiddler for debugging the caching, or debugging basically to see what's happening, what communication is fired between the server and client, because built-in networking tools in browsers, like in Firebug, let's say, sometimes doesn't display all the communication that is going on, so I'm using the Fiddler. And then if we are talking about the server side, I'm using mostly the Kentico built-in debugging tools. In 6.0, they are really powerful because they use visual elements to differentiate between, let's say, slow performing queries. It can give you an idea of what pages are using too much view state, what controls are using dirty view state. So I'm using the built-in debugging tools at first place, and then if I need more information, I go and use, let's say, SQL Profiler, which is built-in tool in Management Studio. And if I need to verify the performance, like the load that website can handle, or how much request it can handle, I'm using the web capability tool. Web capability tool, yeah, it's the abbreviation is WCAT tool. It's a free tool from Microsoft. It's kind of very simple, but it can do the what I need from it. So it can generate the multiple users at the same time using the separate threads. So that would be the set of tools I'm using most of the time. So we notice the first hit to another question. We notice the first hit to a website in the morning takes the longest. We think this is because the just-in-time compiler has to compile the website. Any suggestion on how to keep the websites from compiling, realizing that it will recompile after each time we restart the app pool? So yeah, the reason why it takes longest in the morning is probably because there is not enough traffic going on overnight. There are settings in the IIS that allows you to specify what would be the idle time before the application pool is automatically recycled, because at some point it's desired to have like the application pool to restart overnight, because it's like everything based on the Microsoft. the restart is a good thing to do from time to time. So if you want to prevent that automatic restart, you can either extend period based on the like idle period that before the application pool is restarted, based on the information you have on what is the longest interval between two visits from the visitors overnight. What you can do is also use the well, you can basically create the schedule task or implement some custom. I can imagine it would be custom web part, or it can be custom web service. Basically, some piece of code that would fire requests to your website on on some regular interval in case that there was no visit for certain number of minutes. But the bottom line is it's happening because there is no traffic on your website, and therefore you need to somehow make the website think that there is something going on, and there are several ways how you can do that. I've seen the customers achieving that using the web service, and they have basically the web service sitting at the end of their website, and they have schedule task on one of their servers, which basically once an hour ping a very simple website that is part of the content. And that way, they prevent restarting the application pool. Did that answer your question? There is nothing built in that would do that for you. So it's just a matter of figuring out what would be the easiest way for you to keep website busy. Okay, so if you don't have any other questions, I would like to thank you once again for your time and apologize for a delay. Hopefully it was worth your time to be here today, and yeah, I'm looking forward for some other partner webinar next time. Thank you very much.